Hello and welcome to episode 4 of This Is Not a Book Club. As always, I'm your host Salim and I'm joined by...
Javad. You
Also-
forgot my name?
Also a host, a co-host. Sorry, we're
Yes,
co-hosts. Go on.
No, I had a joke, but I want to say it after you say a little bit of stuff.
That sounds like it's going to be a great joke.
Yeah.
I can't wait. Right, so where to start? Well, firstly...
I'm going to say the joke.
Okay, go on.
I'm going to say the joke. So you did one marathon and you forgot my name. And like,
We said we'd talk about the marathon later, but you're bringing it up. Do you want to show we might as well, we're here now.
One marathon, and you forget my name. But
I think just hold it over your face just in case it doesn't show up on camera.
Yeah, so
just
you don't want even my
cover your
face to show.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, you would much rather if you were doing the podcast with the medal. Huh?
Yeah.
Should I just put it
just
here?
me in the middle talking to each other.
I know even while I'm talking, you're talking to this.
I'm not looking at you, yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So there's the... I ran the marathon. It's not a big deal. I don't know why you brought the medal in. There was no need for that.
Yeah.
But, we're here.
I sneaked it into your car and
Yeah, you went into my house, got it framed. Thank you so much for that, by the way. So yeah,
this is the actual one, right? It's not like a fake medal.
No.
This is the actual.
It's the actual medal. Yeah.
Okay, very nice.
I actually know someone who snuck into the marathon at the beginning. This is something you can do. I didn't know you can do this. I don't endorse criminality, but snuck in at the beginning, so he didn't get a bib. So at the finish line, he didn't get a medal because they were like, "Where's your bib?" And he said, "Oh, it's like," he just mumbled and then walked off. But he did the marathon.
He just finished it.
But it doesn't count because he didn't get a medal.
Yeah, this is what... Yeah. Now that I have this, it's like I've done it, right? So
thank
you so much.
You're welcome. It's something to remember me by.
Yeah.
Also, we have merch. So this is... I don't know which camera I'm looking at. One of the cameras. Jazz Printing Solutions, company based in Watford, very generously made these for us. And we also have these long life bottles as well. I feel like a TV salesman. You're just sitting there looking at me. Feel free to hold yours up as well and say something.
Yes, it's really nice. I always wanted a mug with our thing on it, and I can't believe we're there.
We're there.
Episode 4, we've got a mug.
I'm pretty sure in the first episode we did talk about people giving us free stuff, and it has happened, and not once but twice.
Yeah.
So this is a free shout out we're doing here. I don't know why. Next one you'll have to pay, but we got these. So I'll just hold this up. I met these guys, Golden Motors. So I met these guys in the US. I was in the US last month. And they listen to the podcast and they're big fans. When I told them we're doing an episode on Can't Hurt Me and David Goggins, they were like, this is amazing. Now, what Golden Motors, what they do is they turn regular bikes into electronic bikes. So there's like an attachment. Now, it would have been 10 times better had they given us 2 sets of that.
Yeah.
But instead we have 2 t-shirts.
It's never late, is it? And if they can always do that as well.
I'm not gonna message them, but if they are listening, which they hopefully are, then reach out. You got me on WhatsApp. We don't mind, freebies. But yeah, I think the reason we wanted to do Can't Hurt Me as a book, let's just segue. I mean, how's your life? You've done nothing interesting, obviously. What's going on?
A lot of these are going to come in this episode.
No,
right?
not at all.
Should we do a count? Like 1, actually 2. Go ahead.
Yes, what's going on?
Nothing. You share what's going on with your life, please.
But you did walk here as like an act of, like physical fortitude and endurance and mental.
Yeah, because honestly, the book has a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I really feel like it's one of those. I'm really glad we chose this book. We'll talk about all aspects of it, but it definitely gives a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it's only, right if I walk today. And also I had to finish, I had 2 hours because I'm listening to it second time.
Yeah.
So I thought, let me walk and finish. And it was really nice. Yeah, that's my life. Now go on. Look, just 1 hour of walking, huh? Now tell me about
Leisurely.
4 hours, 41 minutes, 45 seconds of running.
So, someone recommended this book to me a while ago, and in December when I got the marathon place, I'm not doing this to talk about the marathon, but it's going to come up because it's relevant. I decided to start reading the book, and I didn't know, I'm not big on these kind of motivational self-help type stuff generally. I always find it a bit cliche. Things like The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, I remember reading that a long time ago. Robin Sharma, and I just found that a bit weird and whatever else. And this book I found to be hugely inspirational. So similarly, like on some of my runs, I would just be listening to this, and as you said, it gives you so much energy. And when he's talking about, and we'll get into obviously all the things that he talks about, but when he's talking about suffering and pain and endurance and building fortitude, I really felt it. Like there's a real strength to David's story. I feel like really familiar calling him David, but David Goggins' story. And I guess like everything, it can be transformational if you apply the principles that he talks about. Before I let you jump in, let's just get the kind of proper stuff out of the way. So quick bio, as always. So David Goggins is a retired Navy SEAL and ultramarathon runner known for his incredible physical and mental achievements. He grew up in poverty, abuse and racism, but refused to let his past define him. Goggins is also a best-selling author of Can't Hurt Me and a motivational speaker who shares his message of hope, resilience, and mental toughness with audiences worldwide. So how did you find it?
Yeah.
Question before that. Can you summarize the book for people that haven't heard of it, that haven't read it yet?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Just before that, can I say that maybe someone's watching and they love the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari.
What?
I'm just saying it could be someone's favorite, because I feel like a lot of these books, if they come to your life in the right time, they could be transformational. Like even the first time I read this book and this time, I'm getting very different things out of it, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So just for those people, summarize this book, Can't Hurt Me. I think it was a journey of David from a very, very difficult childhood to get himself to a place where he considered himself maybe the strongest person alive, both mentally and physically. And it's really from like a very low. It's not like a normal low. The first few chapters, he talks about his childhood, the way, the problems they had. And it's really like even sometimes difficult to listen to, like that how challenging his beginning was.
Yeah.
And his whole journey is about this idea that doesn't define who I am. I can get myself out, and he showed he can, and he to exceptional height. And he always wanted to be the uncommon among the uncommon, the best among the best, and he achieved it. So maybe that's what would you add to that?
I think just the kind of specifics of, like the sort of bio mentioned, he had a very tough upbringing. His father was a kind of, used to physically and mentally torture his family, his wife, and himself, and his brother as well. And he then, when he in his teens went to school, had difficulty reading. Had all sorts of PTSD from his early childhood. His mum and him eventually ran away from their father. And I think then what was really interesting is like the first, I think maybe I listened to this, and I would also advocate, I want to say it now, and you'll agree with me, that the audio book in particular of Can't Hurt Me is phenomenal
100%.
Because you have bits of David Goggins actually talking. So it's read by somebody else, by the kind of journalist that worked with him on putting the book together. And they have these kind of like mini podcasty type clips where you get like the added insight that you wouldn't get reading the book, which is, it adds a lot of texture, I think, because he includes stories, and there's so many bits of his life that he doesn't talk about. And what I found generally interesting is that this is essentially an autobiography, but there's so many, and he kind of extracts so many different lessons and kind of frames it as, I think, 10 chapters. And at the end of each chapter, he has challenges as well. Mm-hmm. And each challenge is kind of different and a way to help you understand yourself and really, unlock your full potential. Mm-hmm. And it's not just all of his feats, or a lot of his feats are physical, but the principles, I think, are nice enough that they're broad and can be absolutely anything. So whether it's about work or getting a promotion or standing up to a bully or whatever it might be in life that you're facing, he's got some sort of ingredients to overcoming all of that.
Yeah, because I think the main thing that he managed to achieve to get from that very dark place, and the interesting thing, by the way, about the book is that it's full of stories, full of very interesting things that happen in his life. And when you hear to those podcasts between the chapters, you realize, wow, like they had to summarize maybe out of 100 events, choose one to put in the book. Like, despite being so rich in events, it's not even maybe 10% of his life, which just shows like how much this person went through. And I feel like the way he mastered it is that mental game that he managed to come up with. And that's why I think that the lessons from the book are applicable to any situation, because even though he went through a lot of physical transformation, but he managed to control his mind to get there. So that mental strength can be, applied in anywhere.
So I think when we discussed this podcast, I mentioned to you that summarizing the book would be a disservice to the book. Normally we summarize in the first half of the podcast, and the second half we kind of explore. Just because the whole book is his life story. And I think interestingly, one of the things that he mentions is that at one point somebody offered him, I think, $300,000 to buy the rights for his book and his story. And he said, no, there's no way, I can't sell this because my life and my story is everything that I have. He decided to self-publish against everyone's advice, including the co-author or like the ghostwriter. And he self-published. It became a New York Times bestseller. His second book just came out last year. But there's so many things, but I think what would be nice would be to just reflect on and talk about some of the different concepts in the book. So for me, the first one that came up, and one that I use almost recurringly throughout marathon training, is that fifth or sixth mention of marathon?
I lost count.
You've lost count.
Be honest
Okay.
with you.
So he talks about callousing the mind.
Sorry,
No,
I'm just
go
not
on.
sure. So you've done the marathon?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
There's a medal right in front.
Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
God.
yeah.
Yes. So sorry. You were saying.
I was saying, he talks about callousing the mind. And this was a beautiful concept. And like I said, it's one thing that I've used personally throughout the kind of training process, because I'm like, okay.
Training process for what?
Are we going to keep doing this?
Sorry, last one.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
No
promises.
Okay,
no
fine.
promises.
Give it like 5 or 10 minutes before you do it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can. So callousing the mind. So again, like if you think about a builder, for example, they have usually like calluses on their hand from labor. And that means that it's a lot more tough, and they're able to kind of endure a lot more pain than regular folk are. And so he talks about the same principle when it comes to the mind, that we have to suffer, be it physical or whatever it might be, to toughen ourselves and to toughen our minds, and create these calluses so that when times get hard, we have that fortitude and we have that ability to press on through the pain, and I guess beat that pain barrier. The thing that's interesting, and again, I'm going to relate it to running because it's my recent. It hasn't been 5 minutes, so you can't say anything. Good, I like this. So yeah, is that when I was on the longer runs, and then the next week I'd have to do another long run, and I've barely physically recovered, knowing that this is going to help on race day, because I will have this kind of, and there's so many, a lot of it kind of bleeds into one another. So you've got the cookie jar, which we'll talk about in a bit, the 40% rule that he's also got. A lot of these, so I use like everything mashed together to create my own kind of mental framework to try and get through this incredible feat of running the London Marathon.
Yes, you did. This, I think it's such a powerful message that the book shows. And the idea that a lot of the times where we stop, it's not that we're at the end of our physical ability, it's that we're at a place in our mind that's a little bit uncomfortable for us.
Yeah.
He calls it the governor in the mind, I think, right? And I think this is a very powerful concept. And first time I heard it, back when I read the book the first time, it was very interesting for me. I was like, yeah, that's very true. It changed my attitude in the gym. It changed my attitude even later on doing therapy. Like I understood what is happening when people are going through difficult challenges. And I think through these things like callousing the mind or the 40% principle that he says, we usually end like that place where we think like we can't do any more. That's not the 100% of us, because that's how it feels like to us. And, oh my God, I did these push-ups, I can't do more. He says, no, that's the moment you feel like you're at the end of it, you're at the 40% actually. There's way more. And then, although to us he says you don't need to go from 40% to 100, although he tried to do that a few times, but he says you can go from 40 to 50%. And now I feel like even a lot of trainers are like that. Like my trainer, shout out to him, Gains with Govinci. He for example tells me do, I don't know, 50 push-ups. Then I'm around 48. I'm like, oh, this is finishing. He's like 10 more. And while I'm trying to reach to 50, I feel like, oh, I'm dead by the time I do 50. But when he says 10 more, suddenly 55 is easy because now 60 is what I think I'm scared of.
Yeah.
You go to 60, it's like 5 more. And it's the interesting thing is, as I'm going towards 60, I feel like 60 is impossible. But when he says now the target is 65, 60 suddenly becomes so easy. Now 65 is impossible, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a concept that now a lot of people are incorporating into their work, and it really works. It's true that when we think we're done, we still have so much more. And if only we had someone who had done a marathon, maybe he could share us some experiences of how this would have felt in a marathon.
Well, since you ask, no, I agree 100%. When it comes to like thinking about my own sort of training and everything else, I remember doing the half marathon, two years ago, the first time I'd gone up to that distance. I apologize, by the way, for people that think I'm really being self-indulgent. You asked the question, I'm just answering. So I got up to half marathon distance, and that was like the ceiling for me. And I was like, okay, marathon is like crazy, but I did a half marathon, that's fine. Then, like when I reflect back on the last 3 months, at one point for 6 weeks, back to back, I was running half marathons every single week, and I was recovering in time, and I was out again, and simply because that number of 21 kilometers was suddenly half of what I needed to do. Whereas before, 21 kilometers was like the peak. Yeah. There was nowhere else to go after that. And that's the one thing I've really learned is that a lot of it, like you said, and like David Goggins says in the book, 40% of it is I mean, we hit our limit at 40%. We have so much more to give, but it's because we almost inhibit ourselves because of the arbitrary numbers that we see. So like being able to do 50 press-ups, 60 press-ups, whatever.
Yeah.
You tell yourself your ceiling is this number.
Yeah.
But I think the main takeaway for me, and it kind of bleeds nicely into this, the cookie jar that he talks about, is once you've done this, once you've beaten what you previously thought was the limit, is to bank these experiences, to save them. Whenever you've, for example, achieved something that you didn't think was possible, you save this experience in your mind, and when you're going through something tough, when you're going through tough times, you open up this cookie jar, this proverbial cookie jar, and you take a bite of one of these cookies. So if we talk about work, for example, let's say it's a really stressful time, but you're struggling to keep up with everything else. If it's like the busy period, the busy sales month in the whole year, you can look back on last year, for example, when you faced that same period, that same crunch, and you did well, you succeeded, you gave it your all, and you can draw on that positivity and that experience. And I really like that. And that was something that, again, like before I was starting on like literally it was last week was the marathon, on race day, I was walking to the start line. I was like, oh God, this is long. Like this is a really long distance. I haven't done this before. The most I'd done was 30 kilometers. This is 41 kilometers.
Yeah.
And I literally used this. I'm like, okay, no, wait, cookie jar. And I went in there and I took several proverbial handfuls of cookies and just shoved them down my face. So I'm like, I can do this.
Let's make this a little bit more thingy. Like, tell me, like, you're running and you're thinking this?
No. So I'm literally walking to the start line.
Oh wow! So this is even before the start line.
No. I'm in the park because you start in Greenwich in like a big park, walking, and I'm seeing just these hordes of people. And everyone's kind of, and it was raining. It was quite a miserable day as well. And I'm just thinking, why am I here? Like, I've been fasting for the last month. So my training has been suboptimal. And then the first thing I thought was, okay, uncommon amongst the uncommon. That's what Goggins strives to be. That's what we're doing. The last month of training, I could not train properly. And a lot of Muslims that were also training or doing the marathon had the same issues. I spoke to a lot of people and they all struggled. So I'm like, all right, let's just finish it. But I'm like, okay, but still it's a long distance. I haven't done this. It's been only 1 or 2 days since I've been able to eat properly again. What if my body is not properly refueled? What if I get cramp? And then I was like, you know what? I've outdone myself in the past when I thought I had a certain ceiling. I was able to go beyond. Now, let's just do it again. And like, again, but you have to mentally draw on the experiences. Yeah, I was remembering the times when I ran a certain distance, I think it was like 15 kilometers, at a pace that I thought wasn't possible. Funnily enough, I was listening to the book, that run. I was like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing. When it hurts, I'm going to keep going, maintain the pace. I didn't, normally I check my watch to see my pace. I didn't check my pace the entire time. When I finished that run, I'd seen that I'd gone faster than I normally could on these long runs. And I realized, like, again, how much you're kind of leaving out on the table. He talks about this a lot, that in life, we often leave a lot out there to be had because we limit ourselves. Yeah. And so, look, beyond everything, when it comes specifically to the marathon, the 3 or 4 months of training, I've told everyone this so far, that like I've encouraged people to go out, and I encourage you as well to do the marathon. That 3-4 months, you discover so much about yourself. You learn so much about your own limits and the limits that you put on your own mind. And now, like, literally a day or two out after the race, I was in a lot of pain, but I was online looking up ultra marathons because of Goggins, ultra marathons, Ironmans. I'm like, what's next? You know, I want to keep pushing. I don't think, and we're going to discuss it later on, but I don't think it's healthy how far David Goggins pushes himself and his own body. But I do think that in pushing ourselves and in experiencing the pain and the suffering physically or whatever it might be, you realize how much true potential you have. Yeah, no, definitely. It's truly incredible what knowing more about the mind can help us do. Because think about it, you yourself said that in the beginning of this marathon, as you're walking, as you're going to start, the doubts are coming in, and then you've heard this concept that there's something called the cookie jar, and that helps you, gives you almost a kind of advantage over the governor in the mind that wants to stop you. Yeah. And I think this is very important for people to know, that this is not about who's better than who. This is about, let us learn things that can help us live a better life. You know what I mean? Because I don't want anyone watching or listening to feel like, oh, I'm lazy, I'm awful, you know, David Goggins is better, Salim's done a marathon. No, Salim's done a marathon. Anything is possible. And if Salim could do it, honestly, I believe that 100%. I want to bring it a little bit, because I'm also sometimes, you know, working with people who, for them, a marathon is just getting out of the house. You know, when the depression gets too much, or when anxiety is there, that what if I go among people, you know? And it's I think for everyone, their marathon may be a different thing, you know? Like even for you, maybe 2 years ago, it was the half marathon was your marathon. That's the peak you want to achieve. Now I'm saying for someone, this could be just, let me get out of the house today, you know? And I'm working with a lot of people who even like just getting out of the bed may be difficult for them. And I'm saying that treat that as your marathon, maybe. You know what I mean? Like this, it doesn't have to be for everyone the same. We can all start from where we're at, and know that a lot of the times what is stopping us, for example, especially with when we're you know, afraid of, like, I don't know, it could be anything, giving a public speak, going to a stranger and trying to make a new friend, you know, these things, you can really see as you're approaching it, these thoughts come, fears come, doubts come, and it's at that point that they make it seem, the thoughts inside, that you can't do that. You're not physically capable of talking to a stranger, whereas you are. Everyone is physically capable of that. So realizing that this is a mind game. And there are concepts for any person. There are things they can learn and slowly, you know, work on that, the fears and on their. And I think this concept of cookie jar is actually one thing that even in a lot of therapies we use. Like basically in a lot of therapies, if you want to build confidence, they like make small wins. And then the wins help you change your belief about yourself. Because I say, I can't do this. But if you've already had a few small wins behind you, which is basically the cookies in the jar, then those can help you know, no, maybe I can do it. So I feel like for anyone, wherever they are in their life, try to make small wins for yourself. You know? But I sorry to interrupt, but I think it's what's significant about it is you have to actually acknowledge and recognize the wins when they come along. The problem, and that's what, like, for example, with me, I'm generally quite a confident, carefree kind of person. But when it came to this specific thing of this, like running a, you know, 42 kilometers. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And the only way I could get there, because I know physically we can do anything, like, within reason, but we can do a lot.
We can do a lot.
But it's 90% of it, in my opinion, is the mental inhibition. Like, mentally we hold ourselves back.
Yeah.
But when you kind of are able to recognize and take stock and acknowledge the wins that you've had, it makes the journey a lot easier.
Exactly. Yes. So actually, to basically, yes, use the wins, make them, get some small wins even, because we have to consider we could be talking to someone who's a teenager, who's in their 17s. And being 16, 17, 18, it's not that easy to look back and find a lot of wins because you haven't lived that much. You know, so even Goggins, he himself says when he was, for example, like by the time he's like 15, 16, he may not have that many wins to look back to. So that's why it's so important if we're early on in our life and we don't make some small wins, and that could be really small, like I woke up earlier today, or I cleaned my room today, or I went out and I walked for 2 minutes, or I just went to the park and came back. Because for some people that is a massive win. Build some of these small ones, and then you're right, really keep track of them, acknowledge them, know that you achieved this.
I think this is where people fail often, like when people start on any sort of journey, be it reading or cleaning or fitness or whatever, they'll start and then they won't acknowledge the fact that they've started. They won't recognize the significance of what they've done. And then suddenly they kind of they lose motivation, they lose inspiration, and they don't have that bank of, like, okay, this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved to fall back on. Because everyone is too caught up in the here and the now. They never reflect back on their journey. They never look back. And like, even with myself, I've had chronic back issues for years. My friends make fun of me because I say I can't play football. Like, I keep getting injured, but somehow I've run a marathon. And I constantly look back. I'm like, you know what? Like, from a place where when I would go to Sainsbury's, I wouldn't be able to push the shopping trolley, like when it got too heavy, and I couldn't turn because my back would hurt too much. And I was basically immobile for many months to suddenly, well, not to suddenly, but to gradually getting to where I'm at now is remarkable. And it might not be remarkable to you or anybody else, but for me, I have to celebrate that. I have to bank that, basically.
Absolutely. I think that's very important what you're saying, to really appreciate the wins, because that is the process through which our beliefs change about ourselves and what we can achieve. Because as you said, what stops us are those limiting beliefs, and the limiting beliefs are often not conscious. They're in our subconscious, and the only way we can change them is by keep giving these information, although there are other ways as well. But when you keep reflecting on what you've achieved so far, it really helps that subconscious belief change. So I think it's very important. And as you said, I'm very happy you said that. Everyone has a different journey. Never compare yourself. Try to just see where you are and try to go a little bit forward today. And the beauty of it is that maybe in a matter of few years, what you could not even imagine, you're achieving it. You need the journey does not need to start very crazy. It just needs to start the next step. That's it. We are halfway through. Should we do our ratings of the book?
I wanted to very quickly talk about a couple of the stories.
Okay.
Then we'll do ratings, and then we can kind of discuss some of the themes a bit more. So there was a couple of things. The first is the weight loss journey that David Goggins goes through. So basically he's, I think, 300 pounds, which is 136 kilograms. He's overweight. He's a cockroach exterminator. He does all these kind of restaurants late night to clean them out and whatever. One day he's sat at home after a shift and he sees the Navy SEALs on TV, and there's like a documentary about them, and it's talking about Hell Week. Hell Week is the most brutal week within the SEALs training, and he kind of decides on the spot, I want to do this. He doesn't actually act on it at that point. And then I think a few days later, he was on a job basically, and he faced the worst roach infestation he had ever seen. And he literally dropped all his gear on the spot, drove home, and quit immediately. He then called a recruiter and said that, I want to apply to be on the Navy SEALs. And the guy said, all right, cool, but you realize you have to lose 100 pounds, which is 48 kilograms, within 3 months, to be able to apply. Because he was getting old, there was a certain whatever. And I think that journey in itself, and like what happens from there, like where he actually goes through the weight loss and then he's having to study to pass the tests as well, is just, that in itself could be like its own motivational book and story.
Yeah.
Because he endures so much and he manages to do it within 3 months, losing an entire human being, depending on how big the person is. There was also one other thing. So post reading the first book, I went down a bit of a David Goggins rabbit hole. So obviously I looked him up on YouTube, saw a few clips, then suddenly the algorithm got me. And I was seeing shorts and all of this stuff. And I came across this one video of this like CEO called Jesse Itzler. So now Jesse Itzler is talking about how he came across, and he wrote a book called Living with a SEAL. And he doesn't mention David Goggins at the time, that it's Goggins that he's living with, but now it's kind of public knowledge. But he mentions that he ran a 100-mile endurance race with his friends, 4 friends, as a relay. So they all take turns, and it's 100 miles over 24 hours. And he goes that when they were lining up to getting ready, they had all of their snacks and their supplies and this and their massage gels and whatever. And he was fascinated by this one guy that he saw. And this guy was sat there with like a foldable chair and a box of crackers. And that was it. And he was just sat, and everyone had come in teams, and he was sat on his own. And then basically in the book, he kind of talks through how he tracked down David Goggins, invited him to live with him, and he trained Jesse Itzler for 30 days. So David Goggins lived with him, woke him up at the crack of dawn and this crazy stuff. And then also his second book, Never Finished, came out a few months ago. So I've also listened to that. I went on a very deep dive. So now I can just hear his voice. Whenever I'm reading the words, I can hear his voice kind of ringing in my ears. Yeah. But I think there's so many different stories. There's one other concept very quickly that he talks about, which is called taking souls. This one was a bit interesting, but he basically talks about in Hell Week, the instructors are there to kind of torment them. And they're trying to make these guys quit. They're trying to make the physical endurance as tough as possible. So, for example, they're carrying these huge boats over their heads, and they're having to run on the sand and then jump in the water, and they're sleep deprived and all of this stuff. And so he realized that whilst these guys are trying to break him, he needs to be able to break them somehow. So when he was at his weakest, when him and his crew were at their weakest, he basically got them, I don't know if they were like chanting or doing extra, like lifting the boats up or whatever, but they wanted to show these guys that we're broken, we're at our weakest right now, and you can't break us. And so he talks about it, whether it's like a bully or whatever it might be, but also like any sort of physical, any sort of task or anything that you're doing, you have to be able to have the tactical advantage and the upper hand over it. This concept is taking souls, and I think it's more a self-reflective process where you're saying that, okay, I'm battered right now, I'm weak, I'm struggling, but I need to have the upper hand. I'm going to figure out how to position myself higher up than I currently am. No, that was a very interesting, that scene when they're, after like a whole week of difficult training in really difficult conditions, like I think for someone like me, it would be impossible to imagine. They're going through all of that. Now they have to carry their boats, lift it, and go through these very difficult terrains. They haven't slept for days. They're tired, cold, haven't eaten. And they're really struggling. And then they see the trainers are like really, so they're like, you know what, instead of just lifting it, we're going to keep throwing it. That's...
And it's just like crazy. And the interesting thing is they barely had energy to like keep lifting the boat. But when they were like, you know what, we're going to show you. When they start throwing it up, it becomes easier for them. Which is such an interesting thing. Sometimes when things become harder, they become easier. Yeah.
No, it was a great read, I think, overall. So probably good to get onto the ratings.
Let us do that.
So, readability, practicality, and depth or quality of insight. So readability?
I think I gave it a 10.
You gave it a 10? I gave it a 10 as well. 10. I thought it was a really engaging read. The podcast style, like I mentioned, with the audio book, it gives it a really nice... deeper insight, so definitely
listen. You wouldn't get bored of this book. You wouldn't get bored of this.
Practicality,
9.
9. I went for 8 because I think you can apply a lot of this stuff in your life, and there's great examples and great challenges and lessons, but I need to have the upper hand. I'm going to figure out how to position myself higher up than I currently am. So I went for 8 because I think you can apply a lot of this stuff in your life, and there's great examples and great challenges and lessons, but I need to have the upper hand. I'm going to figure out how to position myself higher up than I currently am. But I think the problem with everything is that unless you actually apply it, it doesn't mean anything. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of lessons there. It's a great book, but the first time I read it was in like December, a few months ago, and I've realized that like I've forgotten a lot of the things. I haven't applied a lot of the things, and so it's just a nice read, and it's a bit of a fanciful experience. But then it's when you actually implement that it can be effective. And then depth or quality of insight.
8.
8?
I'll explain in the second part. It was very difficult for me because on the one hand, I wanted to give it a 20 out of 10. On the other hand, I wanted to give it like around 2.
You have no chill.
And I'll explain.
You have no chill. How can you go 20 to...
I'll explain.
Yeah, okay, fine.
So I gave it an 8.
I gave it a 6 because I think it's... Again, it's tough because it's very specific and very limited at times, but I also found myself at times questioning the framework and the mentality, and I think that's what we're gonna. In fact, let's start there.
The second part,
the epilogue, as we call it, where we kind of critically analyze and discuss the themes and just try and pick apart the book a little bit.
Yeah.
So my first kind of thing, and maybe this was after reading the second book, is that I just feel like he goes too far. In everything that he does, his body is broken and battered and finished, but he has to go one more. He has to keep doing more. And I just think that there's there's this building this mental fortitude, but at some point you just have to relax.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can't believe we're in the second part. There's so much to talk about.
Should have skipped the first.
Honestly,
it's too much marathon talk. Way too much.
Honestly, should we just delete that? No, I think that first part was. Anyways, so I agree with you that he goes too far.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the problem is, what do I go too far in, and how can I do that in a healthy way? See, there is a drive within him that wherever I am, that's not enough. I need to do more. This drive is what makes us human. This is the drive that he may not believe in a soul, or actually he may, because that's what the soul does, because the soul is infinite. And no matter what you achieve, it says, that's not enough for me, I want more. So the idea to keep pushing, it's actually a very human thing. However, what I think the challenge then is to find the right alignment that, first of all, this thing that you're pushing too far in and you want to go all the way is aligned with some higher values you have. And secondly, it's done in a healthy way, so that it's not at the cost to other aspects of your life and something like that. And that's one of the reasons why I said, on the one hand, I want to give it a 20, because psychologically, the book is very deep, very deep. But on the other hand, I wanted to give it a 2 or a 0, because I'm like, you made yourself into this amazing, capable being who can achieve so much, but what is it at the end of the day being used for? Like I have, for example, some ethical concerns about some of the things that maybe the Navy SEALs do, like he even speaks about, for example, when they, invaded
Iraq and Afghanistan,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, see, you made yourself into this amazing, capable machine, but someone else decides how this is being used. Although this is not a judgment on David, because he maybe grew up in an environment in which he trusted the wisdom of people who go and told him, go do that. They thought maybe he's doing good work. But maybe another person from an outside perspective says, well, it seems like that actually was not a very ethical thing to do. Maybe it was the interest of some other people who got these people. So, so it's an interesting thing. Look, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's something I've actually been discussing with a friend, that like, even when it comes to this pursuit of physical perfection or endurance, all of this kind of stuff, pushing your corporal body existence to its like limits, I think without, as you said, without like a specific angle or direction, it's very temporary. Like in that it's very physical, and once your physical body dies, if we acknowledge the existence of the soul, then to what end? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do get that, but I think maybe a bit harsh on your side, saying, you know, like what's the value of what he's done?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, paraphrasing, but no. But what I was going to say is, you I think he has achieved a lot in terms of, for example, lifting others around him through his speaking and through his works, to bettering themselves and finding themselves out of depression and anxiety and all these kind of things.
100%. No, I did not say he has. In fact, I think more important than his achievement in those trainings or physical one is that he has proven that a human being can achieve this mental strength. This is a gift to humanity.
Yeah.
This is why I said the book deserves 20 out of 10. Because there's a few scenes in the book which I, as a psychologist, wanted to get up and clap for him. There's that point he says he's in a meeting and one of the scientists there says this thing is not humanly possible. And he says, I was just like, this is nonsense. I can do this. This thing you're saying it's impossible. I can do this. And this is so important because I think one of the problems we have is that if, as a culture, or experts, we put a ceiling on humans' potential, then we all believe it and then we never get out of our problems. And so I genuinely think the biggest gift of David Goggins is not his physical strength, is that he showed his mental strength, that human beings, we can reach to this level. And this is incredible. I think it's, honestly, that's why I really hope everyone reads this book. It's very good in that sense. Then, after having read this book and seeing what we're capable of, then we need to talk and discuss, okay, now that we know this knowledge about ourselves, what's the way of going about living a human life? Should we all go running ultra marathons? Or should we, now that we know this about ourselves, start thinking about what is the reason I'm in this world and then use this knowledge there?
Okay, so let me ask you very practically. I was going to say, let's pretend like it's just me and you having a conversation, which is what we're doing. I've just run the marathon, right? I've realized a lot about myself.
Yeah.
Now, where do I go next? So I'm just thinking ultra marathon, because obviously you've done the marathon, you go one up. But if we're saying, all right, let's move away from the physical, this being human, what does that mean?
So, see, marathon, the beauty of it is that it, as you said, it helped you learn a lot about yourself. But I don't think most people, their goal in life is to become like ultra marathon runners, right? What is your goal in life? That's something that's separate to this. You need to figure out for yourself. Yeah. For example, maybe someone says, you know what, for me, it's very important to contribute the world through this cause, or to have a nice family, be a loving father. Now, after that, or for example, I don't know, end loneliness, or I want to help people with mental health. I want to do this. Once I know what I want to achieve, then I need to figure out what are the marathons in that. What are the marathons in being a husband? What are the marathons in being a father? You know, and then in all of those, then you look at that at your marathon. You go for your cookie jars, like you've been a father, and you know that even in being
still am a father, by the way.
Yeah, I said you've been. I didn't say
I've
you
been,
were.
like in the past.
Oh, okay. That's just You are. You've been,
and I will be.
And you will be a father. In that, there are moments where you're like, I can't listen to this child anymore. I can't be patient with this child anymore. You say you can't. David Goggins would say you can. You know what I mean? So I think prior to seeing where do I want to increase my ability, I would much rather if we increase our abilities in the skills we need in our own life. Because do you remember he said I was a great runner, but I wasn't a great hiker at some point, although he became. Why? Because he said you use different muscles for running than you use for hiking. So become a great marathon runner, but if you come at home and you shout at your family, that means there's another marathon there. You know what I mean? There's another set of muscles that we need to. So this is why I think it's very important. If I want to keep pushing myself forward, I can do the marathon to learn I can. But now that I see, oh my God, how much I can, then bring that knowledge to your life and then push yourself forward in that. Does that make sense?
That's nice. Yeah, I like that.
And that's why I gave it, I think, 9 from practicality, because this can be applied into anything. And I genuinely think we need now the David Goggins of emotional life. Now we know that we can do that. Now we need to know that, yes, you can be a person who for 2 years hasn't shouted. We need to know that you can be a person who even loves their partners when they're grumpy. Now I can learn to become a person who can handle a toxic person and even help them out of being toxic. Not to take any abuse, but I can learn to be such a way that I can even turn toxic people into better people. Now this is, I think, the areas that it would be very interesting now to look at, and then just see what human life becomes. And the interesting thing is, even David I don't know if you noticed this in the book or not, it seems like he even went on an emotional journey. Like initially in the early, I don't want to spoil much of the book, but his attitude even became very different towards the end. Like when those chapters when he's talking about being a leader, it's very different to when he's talking about in the Hell Week, later on when the Delta training.
Yeah.
So you see, even then he's thinking about, okay, how can I lift others up? How can I? Those are the beautiful things for me.
But he acknowledges that as well, that journey that he goes on, where initially it's very much about myself and me and how can I be the best, and I don't want to interact and whatever else. And then he realizes that as part of a team you need to, and I think there are experiences that he goes through where he's shunned for certain positions and overlooked and had applications rejected, whatever else, where he kind of realizes that this like solo voyager mentality that he has, this like Lone Ranger, I'm gonna just be the best and climb to the top without anybody, attitude that doesn't get him as far as he wants in his career. I think what's interesting, and again, I don't know, I'm kind of speculating here, but he does kind of allude to his personal life every now and then. I think he mentions being divorced a couple of times in the book and whatever else. And again, this isn't a judgment in any way. I don't know the details of his life, but I did find it interesting that it almost seemed like as much as he was succeeding with all of his personal physical feats, there seemed to be issues on the other side. So even like his relationship with his brother that was broken down after their early childhood. And again, that's not to... definitively, I don't know, but I think the difficulty is that sometimes when people excel in one particular area, and I've seen this actually in my own experiences when I've interacted with people, I've known some of the best community leaders and activists in our, in politics and things like this. And when you get to know them a bit better, you dig under the surface, you find out that their home life is miserable because they can't, that same energy, that same drive that they have in one particular area, they struggle to transfer across. So when you talked about, the marathons of being a father, being a partner, being a son, a mother, a daughter, whatever it might be, I think that's really important.
Yeah. So and of course this is not at all a judgment on anyone, because David has shown that how much he's achieved is amazing. I'll just say this a little bit because I feel like this would help people. When people are in suffering, like David was early on in his childhood, you get a lot of pain, you get a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of that. These are not bad things. These can often be the fuel that pushes you out of that suffering, like how he got himself out of that. And I even remember talking to some of my colleagues who were therapists, and they had it's interesting, most therapists have very difficult childhoods. So one of them said something which was really interesting. She said, I had a lot of anger as a child, terrible life. And she said there was sadness and there was anger. She said, I tried to turn the sadness into anger because anger became a fuel that could push me out of it. So I feel like also David had a lot of things, a lot of negativity that had happened to him, that at some point he managed to use all of that as a fuel to push him out. And that moment in you said he went to, there was a lot of cockroaches, rats on his face, and he was like, enough is enough. That's the moment in which you take the darkness in your life as a fuel. And if you see how far David has gone up, it's because of how down he went in darkness, and it's like a spring. You go so down, and that's why it pushed him so up.
But how So there's two things. Firstly, and I think you've nicely segued into the final bit I wanted to discuss, which was around trauma.
Okay.
But I was going to say, how do you spring up? How do you rise above without hitting rock bottom?
Okay.
Because I don't want people to have to like lose their house and get a divorce and all of these things for them to suddenly rise up.
Yeah. Of course. And it doesn't have to be that bad. Any kind of darkness could be used to push us a little bit forward. Let me just make sure the point I wanted to make this, that to some extent, even sacrificing other aspects of life to get out of darkness, it's okay. Because, for example, to keep anger inside is not healthy. But initially, to take myself out of that miserable life, anger is perfect. Anger is your fuel. Resentment is okay. And even David, like, forget about your relationship with your brother. Now get yourself out. The thing then is, once you feel like you're a little bit over the ground, then you have to, instead of still focusing on this one aspect, go and try to be a little bit more comprehensive. I'm saying that not everyone can, from the very start, in a very healthy and comprehensive way, get themselves out. It doesn't matter. Use the darkness in whatever way you can get out of the darkness, live, but then know that this is not the way forward. The way that got you out of the darkness is not the way you have to live forever. You don't need to keep pushing yourself physically. Now look, what are the other things I can do? So that's just one thing I wanted to say, because I feel like this is very important for us to know. Now, what you're saying is also very important, because with some people, the only thing stopping them from having a better life, even there's a book like Why Do People Don't Heal? And the idea is this, that they don't reach that point where they get fed up of the difficulties in their life. And they've become used to the uncomfort. The uncomfort has become comfortable. And perhaps for people like that, this book would be useful in the sense that, okay, even you maybe 4 years down the road, 5 years down the road, because even David, it's not like from the beginning he got to that point where he was like, I want to spring up. I'm saying now, before reaching that, maybe you can start thinking about what kind of life is possible for you. And one of the things, for example, sometimes we ask people is like, what do you want future to look like? For a second, forget about what you can't do. Just think, what would you like 5 years down the road to look like? But what would it look like if you continue this way? Because this way, maybe in 2 years down the road, you get to the bottom rock, because a lot of people were on the way to the bottom rock. Rock bottom. Yeah. We're on the way there, but you don't need to get there. You can visualize it.
Yeah.
If you say, okay, where do I want to be in 5 years? And if I continue like this,
where will I end up?
And so you visualize the rock bottom. And for us mentally, a lot of the times visualizing something has the same impact as being there. So it would help us get out of it. Yeah.
I prefer bottom rock to rock bottom, because it sounds like there's an actual rock down there. Rock bottom's just like a phrase that we say. We can coin it as a this is not a book club exclusive. Yeah. Bottom rock.
Bottom rock.
If anyone wants to make us t-shirts with bottom rock on it, we'll take them.
Yeah.
I think the main thing, because we both kind of read this book twice, and the second time I was reading it, I was thinking a lot about trying to understand his psychology, especially in his early childhood, especially in those formative years, and thinking, if I was in that position, if I had all that going up against me, what would it take, or how would I change my situation? He says very explicitly at the beginning that he was meant to be a statistic. He was meant to be someone that would die, or not amount to anything in his life. And to be honest, when I heard that at the beginning, I'm like, okay, everyone says this. You hear his life, and actually, you know what? Like what and that's the thing. That's the power of this book. What he managed to achieve from where he came, from everything that he faced, is remarkable. And I think, again, with your kind of psychology hat on, and we've been talking about it already, but I think, for people that are going through whatever level or degree of suffering, be it PTSD, depression, anxiety, and I feel like these are like recurring themes more and more. The reason I say this is that, like, I recently gave a talk at Sunday school about social media, and I was talking to 15-year-old and 16-year-old kids, and I asked them, let's talk about the pros and cons of social media. Let's weigh up both sides. overwhelmingly they said social media did more harm than it did good, which I found interesting. But then when I asked them for reasons, I've done this like many years. I've done this for about 5 or 6 years. This was the first cohort where a lot of them were talking about mental health, and they were talking about isolation and anxiety and depression and all the issues that can stem from this. So I think, now I don't know if it's just these are buzzwords that are being thrown around so much that people are now just using it to label absolutely anything. Oh, I don't feel great today. Okay, yeah, you've got depression. I don't know. But I feel like a lot of people are going through a lot of very serious things. So I guess the question is how fundamentally, you know, if we take a book like this as a premise, like if someone was to pick up this book today, having listened to this podcast because they're going through some sort of issues, how would they use a book like this to fundamentally improve or change their situation?
I think the great thing about the book is that it shows human potential. And it is not a joke that, mental health crisis is real. Statistics are showing it's going exponentially high, especially for teenagers since the beginning of social media. Like the data is very clear on that. Jonathan Haidt of the second. He's doing a lot of great work on that. People can go read it. He's updating his work on that. So it's very real. And I think maybe the best, that's why I said I hope everyone reads this book, and I hope they get this thing out of it, that human potential is way more than even sometimes experts or scientists think. Do you remember we were talking about the Ronaldo of morality? David Goggins makes Ronaldo look like, you know, one of us. So there's David Goggins in the world. And the interesting thing is, you know, at the end of the book, you were telling me David Goggins says, when people die and go to the, for example, Day of Judgment, God is there showing them what they could have achieved. And David says, I wanted to achieve so much that even God would say,
I didn't expect it.
But what David doesn't know is that, David, there's still way more even for you to achieve. You know, and even David, if he looks at what human potential is, he'll be like, wow, I still have so much more. And this is important. Why? Because I feel like one of the feelings we have in the culture right now is that the culture doesn't have too many David Goggins when it comes to, for example, psychology or whatnot. And the general belief in what a human being is capable of is going low. And you have, for example, even some people in my own field that when they see someone, for example, with going through a certain challenge, the belief the person has, forget about that person going through the challenge, is that, oh, you can't come out of it. If you as the person who's helping them don't believe they can, how can you ever help them out of it? Or sometimes even, for example, another thing now, if I have the same challenge as you, what message am I giving you? Imagine, for example, David trying to run people for a marathon and he says, I haven't finished one yet. You know what I mean? So reading, I think, David Goggins and then trying to bring it to your own life in different challenges you may have, to know that I can overcome this. This human being thing we are is incredible. Like sometimes people tell me, oh, this person did this to me and I really can't get over it. I'm like, you don't know yourself. That's exactly like Salim in the beginning of the marathon saying, I can't do this. No, you can. You don't know what you're capable of. I can never get over this. You know, anytime we say something like that, it means it's very difficult. Right now, I think I can't do it. But this is a mental game between you and the time in which you overcome that. And so use the book and keep thinking of what are the things you're telling yourself you can't do. You know, the same thing applies there. There is nothing that a human being cannot achieve. If in physical life there are limitations, in your spiritual life, there's no limit. And that's why I said David still doesn't know how much more he can achieve. Because when it's in the spiritual life that the full potential of a human being is shown. You know? And that really can impact our life so much. Yeah.
So I think for me, the big kind of takeaway listening to this book is that I've always felt like there are certain limitations on what I can do, what I can achieve, what I can be, all of that kind of stuff. And not just physically, we're not just talking about marathon or whatever else, but genuinely with everything. But when you hear his story, and I echo what you said, I encourage everybody to listen to this, just because it's a remarkable story. You look at the front cover of the book and you see the Navy SEAL with the badges and everything, and you think, oh, this guy's already like a superhero. But when you see where he started from and where he came from, he's not even normal like the way me and you are. He has come from a very, very tough position. And what he achieves and what he makes of himself and what he is now today. And if you look at his social media, the amount of people that he's motivated and inspired, and he shares on his Instagram story, people, showing their transformations that were literally down to them reading his book and being inspired. It's remarkable. And it really can. And I think, like you said, it's about at what point in your life this book comes along, what your mental state is like, what you're struggling with, what you're dealing with. But I think there are so many lessons to learn. And even like, the 2 times that I read the book were at 2 times, although it was a couple of months apart, but 2 different times in my life. December, I was just starting out on this marathon journey. I didn't know what I could do. The second time I'd read it, I was just coming up to the marathon and finishing my training and stuff. And I'm a completely different person in 2 or 3 months. And the experience of reading it is so remarkably different. But I think when we were discussing before the podcast what book to do next, I thought the topic of trauma that we've obviously covered quite a bit in this podcast is one that's worth exploring a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I think, you've always said that the experience that you have through your work and dealing with people is that there is a lot of problems that people face, and a lot of people are experiencing different forms of trauma in their life and whatever else. And so I asked you, let's talk about a book that's a bit more science-based. Yeah, I think I read one of the reviews and it said that they were studying to become a therapist and they read this book and they loved it.
Yeah, it's a very easy read, but the guy is actually one of the leading experts on trauma.
So the book for next podcast is called The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk, I think.
Maybe Van der, if it's because he's from the Netherlands.
Leave it, it's fine.
Yeah.
I said it fine, don't worry. It's like, Van der Sar.
Yeah, it's Van der Sar.
Yeah, but it's Van der Sar. Like, no one says Van.
We do in the Netherlands if you go.
Who's we?
Iranians, actually. Iranians say the actual thing, because why should we say the English one? We say the actual things from the Dutch.
You guys are so righteous. Thank you so much.
No, because if you want to learn, why should we learn the English way? We learn the Dutch way if it's a Dutch
I think it's
person.
best we just stick on the topic of the books.
No.
This is what happens. People just think we have petty fights. Well, we do when we're not recording.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we are recording.
So that's the book for the next week. Yeah. I just want to say something about this book.
No, we're done. It's finished.
No, this is important.
No, you can't.
This is important.
We're finished.
James, please
Thank you for joining us on... Go on.
There's something David says in the book which is so important. He says, don't put a label on me to make yourself feel good of not trying. That's so important, because our ego tries to protect us. No, he achieved it because he had this, he's this, he's that. He says, don't do that to yourself. And anyone can improve their life. We don't need to all look the same where we're at the end of it. We're on different journeys. But one thing which I think it's so important for us, and this is something I really try to do for myself, is don't look at what others have achieved to think they're better than you. Look at other people's achievement and say, oh, wow, that's human potential, so I can be better as well.
Yeah.
Like, this is not at all a world of comparing. Like, I look at Salim having done a marathon, and I'm like, oh, damn it, he's done. I'm like, oh, wow, so I can do more as well. But I maybe try to do a marathon, or maybe in another aspect of life. Take joy in what others achieve as a knowledge that I can do more too.
That's beautiful.
And don't let anything stop you from that. So that's what he says. Don't label me to stop trying.
He also right at the beginning of the book says something very cliche. The first time I listened to it, I cringed. The second time I understood, he said, I'm not the hero of this book. You are the hero. This is not my story. It's your story. And I was like, oh, here we go. Like American nonsense. That cliche, like, yeah, we can all do this. And then when you hear the whole story, and he mentions it various points in the book, he's like, look, I'm telling you my story. I'm being very open with you. I'm laying it all bare because I want you to understand where I've come from, what I've done, and that you have the same potential.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. You hit the nail on the head, in my opinion, where it's like, this just shows you that when people are doing things out there that you know, it's not a case of being jealous or envious or whatever else, but I'm here to inspire you with my medal. That's all we're doing here.
You say inspire, I hear shame. That's the point.
So that brings us to the end of another podcast.
Yeah, it's so sad because I still have so much to discuss about this book, but maybe in another book we'll find opportunities for that.
Or we can do the second book, never finished.
Oh yeah, that's it.
And like maybe a few months down the line we can do that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much to everyone for watching, listening, and in case you don't know, Salim finished a marathon.
Come on, you got to finish it properly.
This is not a book club.